All right, so hi everyone. For our fifth episode, we have Robert Farrington joining me today. Robert is a millennial money expert who focuses on helping millennials get out of student loan debt and start investing for their future. Robert also focuses on working with parents to make smart decisions about college financing options. Robert started the College Investor in 2009 as a forum to discuss the complexities of financial issues facing young adults and has emerged as one of the nation's leading student loan debt experts. So, Robert, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Right, awesome. So, I have tons of questions for you, but I think it's always best to start off with our guests just giving a brief introduction of themselves.
Yeah, man. Well, you covered a lot of it. So I started the College Investor as a side hustle. I actually just love talking about money and personal finance. And, one of my things is that since I can remember, I was in middle school, I was in high school, I'd always been entrepreneurial. I'd been selling stuff out of my backpack. I had my eBay account in 2001 when I was in high school, and I was making all this money on the side. And then I was taking that extra money and learning how to invest it and build wealth. And so that was something that I've always been passionate about. I love talking to other people about earning money because to me, you can budget and you can cut costs all you want, but like the ability to earn is effectively limitless. It's just how much time, effort, energy you want to put into it. And that's going to be the key to unlocking your financial goals. And then, of course, I had my own student loan debt because I didn't know any better, right? I still went to college, took out student loans. And, when I was all said and done, I was like, man, I have $43,000 in student loans. Like, what am I going to do with this? Well, side hustles, right? So I was earning more, I was working full time. I paid off my student loan debt in about 3.5 years. And really, the College Investor is just a passion project when I started to talk to people about what I was doing, to share these thoughts, to help people understand how you could do it as well. And here we are over a decade later, and we've grown into a huge financial media platform that, touches all kinds of different personal finance topics.
Right, and that's awesome. So, before I get into some of these personal finance topics, I just kind of wanted to hit on a keynote that you just mentioned. So, generating income and being an entrepreneur. I could say from my experience, one, it is very difficult, but all it takes essentially is just effort and consistency. But with generating income, I think there's a misconception that people don't really understand, and that's generating the income and utilizing it correctly. So when you generate all this income from an entrepreneur, standpoint, you have to consider the taxes and spending and compliance and everything in that nature. So what are kind of your tips for anyone starting out and venturing off, but ultimately begin to generate that income and being like responsible?
Yeah, well, I think it starts too. Like, you don't have to jump into being an entrepreneur. You don't have to start your own business. I think the cool thing is that we live in this day and age where you can pull out your phone and you can literally start earning money. And that could be delivering food, driving for DoorDash. There's like so many different apps to do all kinds of things right now that it doesn't mean like you have to like spend money, start your own business. Like, you could literally just start. So I would encourage everyone to stop worrying about all that other thing. It's all like everything you just said. Don't even worry about, like, go out and actually earn a dollar first. And then let's have that conversation about how you should deploy it. Because I think too many people get hung up on what to do. They psych themselves out of it. They're worried about all these logistics. And it's like, no, you know what? Go out. I want you to drive a ride, make $13, and then let's cash it out. And we can talk about the rest of the issues that go along with it. Because at the end of the day, you still have $13 more than you had 20 minutes earlier, and you're going to be in a better position for the time you just spent. And yes, there are taxes or other implications, but that will help you go to unlock your goals. And I think if you want to have the bigger conversation, it's most people need to step back and ask themselves what they value, what they're spending their time on, and they need to organize their financial life. So when I talk to a lot of young people, most people don't know where they're spending their money. They don't even know what they value. Like, was that really even worth it? And we can't have a good conversation about all this other nuances of stuff until you know what's coming in, what's going out, and what you're spending your time on every day. Because, maybe you work 9 to 5, then you commute home. But what are you doing from 6 to 11 every night? Are you watching Netflix and ordering food every day? Or are you spending time with your family? Or what does that look like? And then we need to talk about what you value. And what I mean by that is like, what's important to you? Is going out with your friends important to you? Well, then let's make sure that we're planning for that. But maybe you have to make other decisions and do less things that you don't value. Maybe like going to your kid's soccer game is like your number one priority. Well, let's make sure we're planning for that. But what are you doing the other times? And so by having an understanding of what you value, you can make better decisions on the choices. Do I want to cut? Like, man, I don't need Netflix because I don't value TV. I'd rather do other things. Well, let's cut that. Let's cut like these 8 subscriptions you have. But on the flip side, if you value something very much, like let's not cut that, but let's look at the other things that you're probably doing that you don't value at all.
Right. And this is a topic that I'm like particularly interested in because I obviously went through that whole process. And when I first began, I worked at a tax office and did my venture. I did it on the side, and it took quite a few months for me to be able to be at a financial position where I could, ultimately leave my full time job and focus primarily within, my recruiting business. But I think it's important, when you are venturing out to have some sort of goal or financial strategy so that when you do begin generating income that you're not carelessly spending because it's there's a saying like it's hard to make money, it's easy to spend money. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity costs when you generate income, but if you're not wise and you don't have a strategic plan to utilize this income, I think this is where most young entrepreneurs will fall short in either scaling or being successful in their venture.
I mean, you're spot on. I mean, it's the whole story of the professional athletes, right? Like all of these like ex NFL, ex NBA guys, they're all broke within like 3 years after leaving the league. And why is that, right? Like all this income they made for a couple years, it goes away, but they didn't save any of it, right? They spent it all, and then they didn't adjust their lifestyle after they left the league. And so it is about having a plan, but your plan goes back to what you value. It goes back to being organized. I mean, I think a lot of people get hung up on like the math, and it's like, dude, if you made it past first and second grade, like you have the math skills to be able to do your budget, right? I mean, we're just talking about income minus expenses equals what's left over. You don't need to get hung up on it. And I think a lot of people just get so hung up on it, and it's basic math, but it all comes back to the psychology, what you value, what you're spending your time on, how you want to organize yourself. And that's what we don't talk a lot about, because that's what it really comes down to.
Right. And I think I'm a big firm believer that like our financial strategies are essentially what we see for ourselves in the future. So I think it's definitely imperative to consider your situation, your financial situation, and kind of also look into what do you want, and then just take the steps to approach that goal. Um, but so I did. I want to move on to one topic. Your work mainly revolves around the younger generation and essentially being a resource and guiding them to a financially stable future. So one topic that I wanted to discuss is student loans, and from your perspective, from just being a resource and being in the industry for quite some time, some of the biggest challenges that young adults are facing when obtaining student loans.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes down to borrowing, if we're going to talk about the paying for college, like what are we telling the high school seniors today? My big message is return on investment, ROI. So student loans are not all bad. Like you might get portrayed in the media like, oh, it's a terrible thing. Like student loan debt's killing us, like it's crushing us. And it's like, you know what? It is hurting people. It's hurting about 5 to 10% of student loan borrowers in a terrible way. But you don't hear the stories of like the 75% of student loan borrowers that are just fine. They went to college, they got a job, they're paying their student loans. There ain't no thing. Like it's just fine. And that's what I like to talk about when it comes to student loans and paying for college in general. So first off, why are you going to college? Well, you're probably going to college because you're trying to get a job that pays you more money, right? I mean, like, let's face it. Yes, there's a lot of benefits to going to college, networking, meeting friends, setting up your life. But really, you're going to college to get some training and some specialized education to go into a career that will ideally pay you more than if you didn't do those things. And so I think that's how we need to frame this conversation, because as much as we want to say everyone should go to college or college is a valuable thing, it is a valuable thing up to a point, right? And so the data tells us that the average college graduate makes between $300,000 and $1 million more over their lifetime than a non-college graduate. Well, that's over their lifetime. So what does that mean in today's value, right? Let's do some finance math, right? Like net present value of, 300 to a million. Well, you're talking about, maybe 70 to $80,000 is the maximum you want to spend to go to college to make that, right? Because if you start spending more than 70 or $80,000, well, the net present value of making 300 to a million goes negative, and now you have spent way too much on your college education versus what you're going to earn over your lifetime. And that is the crux of the student loan crisis, right? That is that people borrowed too much money and they are not seeing a positive ROI on their student loans now that they graduated because they're not earning as much. And you can talk about a lot of macroeconomic factors for this. But if we just want to focus on the individual, it, like this is just the thing, like it's the math, right? So when you're having these college conversations, pick a school that you can afford. Pick a school that you can minimize your borrowing. If you want to be a teacher, I don't want to stop you from being a teacher, but you can go on Glassdoor right now and say like, oh, the average teacher in my state makes $42,000 when they graduate. Okay, well, now I know that. Let's not spend so much money because like we know what the numbers are. So maybe I need to go to community college first, do 2 years there, switch to a state school, and maybe I need to spend $10,000 on my education so that I can make $40,000 when I graduate. Like there's still very clear paths. College is a good thing, but you need to think very carefully about how you're going to pay for it to give yourself a positive ROI. Because the worst thing that can happen, right, is that you overspend and then you spend the next 10, 15 years after you graduate miserable because you're in a financial hardship and you're not seeing any progress, right? That's what we don't want. So when I'm talking about these college conversations, we focus on ROI. And I don't want to smash anyone's dreams, but there's definitely paths to get there. You just have to think through them. And that can be tough because the psychology of it can be a little challenging. Like parents want their kids to go to college. Community college is still a little shunned on in a lot of places, right? Heaven forbid you want to go to trade school. I think it's a great career choice. And these trades are making tons of money, like without even going to college. They'll even pay you to learn. But like there's still this social stigma around it that's even harder sometimes to overcome than the math and personal finance side of it.
Right. And I definitely agree with that. Just the psychology of it all. But then again, I think this ties back into, your beliefs and essentially not, always trying to follow the path that's being taken. You really got to sit down and consider your situation and ultimately what's best for you.
Yep.
So I think that's very important. But I recently came out with an article. You have many articles posted on Forbes.com. And one thing that you dive into is loan forgiveness. And this has been a topic that's been circulating for quite some time. And essentially, I wanted to discuss kind of your perspective of the coming years and if this is even something that's feasible within the US.
Well, let's talk about the current state of everything, right? So, right now, as it stands, with no changes to the law, 50% of all student loan borrowers qualify for some type of loan forgiveness, whether that's total or partial loan forgiveness. So, if we don't change the system, 50% of people get something today, right? And there's big programs like public service loan forgiveness and teacher loan forgiveness. There's also loan forgiveness built into the student loan repayment plans. So there are a lot of options. Plus, 43 states have some version of loan forgiveness within their state. Some of them are like, just for buying a house in the state, they'll give you like 10 grand just to do that. Like there's a lot of great programs out there with no changes to the law. So first off, let's start with that. The big thing that I think we're hearing about in the news is this pressure to cancel student loan debt, eliminate it all, yada, yada. And my whole thing is maybe that's part of the solution. But unless we change the system, like how does just forgiving student loans today, like let's just blanket give everyone 10,000 or 50,000, do anything except be a stimulus check or a handout? And the thing is, it doesn't. It just becomes a political tool. Because what are you telling the college or the high schooler that we just talked about, a couple minutes ago? Like, we're sorry, student loan debt is so toxic that we had to forgive some for everybody, but it's not toxic enough that you're not going to have to borrow it, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So if we're going to cancel student loan debt, I think it could be part of the solution, but it's not the solution. The solution is full higher education reform. How do we lower costs? How do we fix the problem at the root cause so that, we're fixing it for, the people that have student loans? And remember, 75% of people with student loans today have no problems. The system is working just fine. But there are problems for a subset of the system. And I think we need to address that and fix it. So, student loan debt, there's already a lot of options out there. Maybe we need to fix that. Maybe we need to streamline it. I don't think blanket student loan forgiveness is the end all be all. It could be for a subset of borrowers, but it's not going to be anything helpful unless we address it for the whole system.
Right. Right. And I agree with that. And I think partially what the problem is just the access, like, for instance, what you just touched up on, all these channels and things that we can do to address the student loans that, a borrower may have. But I feel as though it's most likely that these individuals aren't aware of these other options that they can utilize. So I think, whether it's raising awareness or just amplifying the resources so that everyone has access to it is part of the solution. Um,
I agree with you, but I also have to always put a little personal accountability on people. So I really do think that's what's a lot of it's missing. Now, I love to say that Sally Mae and these loan servicers are terrible because they do things that are bad. They've been sued, there's been settlements and whatnot. But at the same time, we don't talk enough about personal responsibility and personal accountability. And I think it goes a long way to solving this financial literacy problem, the student loan problem, is that people need to take accountability for their own student loans. And, there's these programs exist, but have you researched your own situation and talked to anyone? Have you tried to explore it? Some people have, but I would challenge that the vast majority of people have been very passive with their student loans and their personal financial situation in general. And they're getting the results that come from not trying to do anything with it, right? And, no one's going to care more about your money in this life than you are. And there's resources like my own out there. There's lots of options. Like, you can spend a few minutes and see if you qualify for anything. Understand how these programs work. Like, when I see these headlines that people are getting rejected from the student loan problem, and then you read the data, and the data says that 60% of people that filled out an employment certification form for public service loan forgiveness didn't fill it out all the way. So then you're mad that you don't get your loan forgiveness when you didn't fill out the form all the way. It drives me nuts. And then you're like, well, what didn't they fill out? Well, they would leave things blank, like their employer's taxpayer identification number. Well, I couldn't find it. Well, you used to do tax prep, right? Or you used to work at a tax office, but we know it's on your W-2. Go find the data, go put it on the form. And don't be so shocked that you got rejected because you didn't fill out the form all the way. It does drive me a little nuts that people are so entitled that they don't take any personal responsibility and accountability for learning, understanding, and following the directions of these student loan forgiveness programs. They've existed, public service loan forgiveness has existed for over a decade now, almost 15 years. And, the directions are pretty darn clear as day, and yet we're still having conversations about how to qualify. And it becomes a little shocking to me about how little people are taking accountability for it.
right. And I think part of that goes into, the kind of the psychological impacts of just personal finance, it being a sensitive topic, for certain individuals depending on their financial situations. But, there's definitely accountability in that. And I think a big part of, personal finance is sticking to a regimen and, being assertive in essentially taking actions in achieving those goals. So I wanted to explore one topic and essentially um, your perspective on what a college student or high school graduate should be considering at this point in time in their career, just like tools, tips or strategies such as obtaining credit, contributing to a 401k, investing. What do you think is the best approach in ensuring that these are aligned accordingly and are being implemented properly?
Well, I mean, honestly, you nailed a lot of it. But like the number one thing that I recommend every high school student and college student do is you better be working. Like, I do not want to hear that you are a high school or a college student and you are not at least part time employed and making some money, ideally in either food service or retail. And here's why: that will give you the skill set of communication and problem solving, which will unlock the doors for you in the future. Like, you have to do it. The money is almost secondary to building the skills. Like, I want every college student to go out and start working and, earning that money. And then, yes, I'd love to see you, like, making sure that you're setting up getting organized with your money, saving for retirement if you can, like all these things. But like, it starts with just working. And I'm still shocked when, only about 50 to 70% of college students are working, depending on the stat you have. Like, how are you not all working full time? Like, I don't want to hear it, that, you have to balance, college and work, because like, I don't know, I've done it. You probably done it. Like, you're totally able to go out and work. Like, you're not studying. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Right. And that will give you the skill set to earn more, because the number, like, when you're graduating college, like, you're trying to get these jobs, you're going to earn more money by having better communication and better problem solving skills, and more money is going to solve a lot of the problems that you're facing, right? And so by bettering your skill set through these things, you're going to set yourself up for success. The other stuff is all easy, right? Like, yes, open a checking account, open a savings account, open an IRA, save for retirement. If your employer offers a 401k, do it. Especially in college, right? Like, put the max in if you can. Use a credit card responsibly, use it like a debit card, pay it off in full every month. But, it comes down to working and getting that skill set for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree on that. I think there's just like this connotation with, I like, for example, I would say like being an entrepreneur and doing, part time and trying to be, essentially like your own boss. There's this like negative connotation where we assume that we have to fit one role and one role only. But most often, it's the doing what you have to do essentially to in order to achieve these goals in mind, and whether that's a business or just a financial goal in mind. These steps are necessary in approaching these. So I think it is important to um, you know have a job, part-time, full-time, in college, high school. I can contribute a lot of the communication skills that I have today, to the positions that I've had after taking a break from college. I worked as a life insurance agent for about 9 months. Then I worked at a tax office where I was assisting clients in the whole CPA office, to ultimately running my own business. So I think I'm a firm believer of compounding interest, that everything eventually leads up to what you're currently doing now, and how you prepared is ultimately the results that'll come about, that. So I definitely do think that's important. It's something that people should consider. Um, but as a last topic of discussion, I kind of just wanted to get your perspective on the direction of personal finance and financial literacy within our school systems, and essentially if we are in the right direction or falling short of providing these students with financial awareness and curriculum.
I mean, we're honestly falling short 100%. Like, I don't think you can disagree with that in the United States today. And some states are looking to improve it. But I always love the memes that come out right now. Like, I'm sure glad that I learned trigonometry in high school, but no one taught me how to do my taxes, or, things like that. And I think one of the things I advocate for a lot is age-based financial literacy. So like, the one thing is like, financial literacy shouldn't be like a course you take in high school. Like, by that point in time, it's kind of too late and no one cares. Like, it's kind of like you're taking that elective probably because you're required to. But what we should be doing is, like, at every grade level, kindergarten through 12th, is that we should be injecting personal finance into some parts of the curriculum, right? From like the basic math skills, like when we're learning 1 + 1, maybe we should start saying $1 + $1 = $2. Things like that, age appropriate, right? Then you move into like 4th and 5th grade and maybe start understanding about how the banking system works. And you could integrate that into like, social studies or something, right? Like, you can make things that actually align with the curriculum by grade. And then as you get older, right, maybe by middle school, you start talking about like how, when you start doing multiplication and division and algebra, you could start interjecting how the stock market works, how compound interest works, how dividends, things like that work, so that people start understanding these things at every level. And then by the time you're in high school, you start putting things into practice, right? So we could start looking at like, what does doing your taxes look like? How do you fill out a job application? What are these accounts mean, like an IRA or, things? And you're applying all the skills that you've learned all the way through onto these things. And then of course, right, we're starting to drive at 16. So maybe like we talk about what insurance looks like and why you need to have it and what that kind of thing means, so you could integrate things at age appropriate levels all the way. And that's what's missing, right? I know there's schools that do a personal finance course here and there, and I think that's valuable, right? I don't want to dismiss anything. Like anything is better than nothing, but we definitely need to be doing a lot more to prepare our children and our young adults for all the different nuances of personal finance, because there's so many things. Like, from the basics of savings and investing to insurance to buying a house to who knows what, right? Like, what does entrepreneurship look like? That's a whole topic of finance in itself, right? And so there's a lot of different things that we need to do better on. And I think it's also the root cause of a lot of problems we see. Like, we put the onus on business owners or investment firms, and they have to be like a fiduciary or not a fiduciary and all these things. And it's like, again, it goes back to this accountability and responsibility. Well, if we actually taught our kids how things worked, we wouldn't have to necessarily regulate so many people to teach brokers that they need to teach their customers how it works. Like, it should be the other way around, right? The customers should be the ones informed, which is effectively our kids and our young adults and our adults eventually, right, on how things work. And I think it would only better society, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this point in time, with inflation, gas prices, cost of living increasing, produce, I could go on and on. It seems as though, now is an imperative time more than ever to, you know, better prepare our upcoming generation to be financially literate. And I think it is very important that we don't skip ahead on, let's say like we start teaching personal finance in high school because that's age appropriate. I think that taking these smaller steps and implementing this during, the early years of elementary school, fifth grade, fourth grade, when they're kind of getting a sense of math, is
Mm-hmm.
the imperative like window where we can kind of instill personal finance so that when they come up to high school they can one implement their knowledge and from what they've learned, but also it's not going to be something that, like you mentioned, just a requisite to take. It's going to be something that they ultimately find a passion for, and then one thing leads to another. I think that with a widespread adoption within school systems of curriculum implementation of something of this sort would be incredibly beneficial for not only our economy but just society as a whole.
Totally. Yeah, just think about that. Like, imagine you're learning math and maybe math's not your jam, right? Like, because, there's people that it doesn't click with them. But maybe if we started using dollars instead of ones and twos, like people might start making that connection. Like, oh my God, like this is where it applies. We're going to say, if you earn $100 plus $20, and like, okay, like you could see the tangible value of learning this stuff and maybe excite kids a little bit more to really understand how this works and why it's important.
Right. And I totally agree with that. So just kind of as a last remark, what do you believe for, any young adult watching, what is something that they could take action now or something that they can reflect on, whether it's with themselves or their goals? What do you think something they should implement today to better financial, themselves in the future?
Definitely. The number one thing that you can do to financially better yourself is get organized. And I'm not trying to say like budget or and don't even make the decision yet. Just get organized and do it in a way that works for you. So what I mean by this is get organized is what's coming in every month, what's going out every month, what you own and what you owe. Figure out how to get it all laid out. And I want you to do it in a style that works for you. So, for example, I'm a tech guy. I like apps. So, there's a bunch of apps out there: Mint, Personal Capital, Kubera is one of my favorites right now. So, you could get organized with an app, but maybe you're not an app person. Maybe you're a spreadsheet person. Well, put together a spreadsheet. Maybe you need pen and paper. Maybe that's your style. So, go get a journal, go get a notebook, write it all out on a piece of paper. Like, I don't care, but figure out your own style for how you're going to get organized, because the only way you'll keep up with it is if you do it in a way that's like your style, right? If you're not an app person and you try to start using an app for your organization of your money, you're just going to fall off on it in like 2 weeks, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves. But like, if you do it in your own style, you'll hopefully keep up with it, which then, once you're organized, you can start making financial decisions to change the course of your life, whatever that looks like. Get out of debt, save for the future, yada, yada. But it all starts with getting organized, but organized in a way that works for you.
Right. And I love that keyword organize. I think when you do so, you kind of see the picture clearer, and ultimately you can assess what's possible and what's doable in these situations. Um, so I think that was incredibly insightful. We are near the end of our timer. So you have the College Investor. That's a website where we can find more resources. Um, regarding personal finance, student loans, a variety of topics.
Yep. You can find me at thecollegeinvestor.com, which is our website. If you like to listen, because you're probably listening to the show right now, you can find our podcast on any of your podcast platforms. It's the College Investor Audio Show. And if you like video, we have short format and long format. You can go on TikTok, you can go on YouTube. You can find the College Investor channel there, and you can watch us on video.
Awesome. Well, great. And so on one last remark, do you have any upcoming projects or anything in the works that we can look forward to?
Honestly, we're just doing the same thing. So we're really been focused on growing out our video channels and our TikTok channel, which has been great. We had our first video hit 8 million views last month, which was amazing to see a video go viral like that. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really bullish on the short video. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. It's great to hear that, this particular type of content is being reached by a vast, a great audience or sized audience. So, I would like to just thank you for joining me. I think we covered a lot of topics, and this was incredibly insightful. And yeah, I look forward to, reading up on the upcoming articles that you may have, and we should definitely stay connected.
Sounds great. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.